Good morning, everyone. My name is Natalie Piperidis, and it's my pleasure to welcome you today to July webinar. Today's webinar is a bit special, and we have four presenters today, and we're going to talk to you about the new strategic plan for SRA for the next 5 years. I would like to begin by acknowledging the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people of this nation. We acknowledge the traditional custodian of the lands on which SRA is located and where we conduct our business. We pay our respect to ancestors and elders, past and present. So today's webinar, we're going to have four speakers. Dr. Garry Rosewarne, General Manager for Variety Development, Tinashi, General Manager Research and Development, Dr. Graham Doyle, General Manager Adoption, and Ben Simpson, Head of Strategy and Data. So without further delay, we're just going to start this webinar because I know you're all eager to hear about the SRA 5 years new strategic plan. And I'm just going to give the floor first off to Ben Simpson. So Ben, the virtual floor is yours.
Thanks, Natalie, and g'day everyone. Just while I share my screen, which everyone should be able to see now. Okay, so before we kick things off, I just want to, I guess, mention a sincere thank you to many of you who are on the call today who came out and provided input in the development of this strategic plan. So over the course of about 6 months, we spoke to just over 220 stakeholders, many of which people travelled quite far and gave up their time at their own expense to provide input to this strategic plan. So we really do thank all of the industry and the government stakeholders who did that. We have been very committed to act on the feedback we heard and put it in the core of our plan. So in terms of what we're going to do today is we're going to give you a very high level overview of what the strategy entails. So why we've landed on this strategy, what's changed and the rationale behind that. What is this 10% productivity target? How have we determined that? What does that mean in practice? And then give you a specific overview about the focus areas and the priorities in each of those focus areas. And then we're going to touch on how we intend to work with partners and ultimately report on progress over the next 5 years to demonstrate that SRA is executing on our strategic plan and that ultimately we are accountable. And then we'll finish off with a Q&A session at the end. I guess today is, as I mentioned, it's about a high-level overview. If you do have particular questions, we can get through to them we'll talk to them at the end of the session today, but also encourage you to jump on SRA's website where we've got a dedicated FAQ section in our strategic plan page. And we also encourage you, if you do have questions or you would like more information, please just contact us offline and we'd be very happy to talk to you. So what SRA has done is we've reset our strategy and we've been very deliberate to focus on productivity, profitability, and accountability. We are being very deliberately ambitious with setting a 10% productivity target to achieve by June 2031. And we've responded directly to the feedback we've heard from growers, from milling companies, from our Australian and Queensland government partners, and as well as key industry partners, productivity boards, industry representative organisations, and other advisors who work in the key growing areas. What we've also done is we've been very deliberate in this plan in identifying fewer priorities and ensuring that we've got very clear delivery roadmaps. So that is, we've spelled out very clearly what we're going to do, when we will do that, and how we're going to do that, and ultimately how we're going to measure our performance on delivering on those priorities. And that is explicitly to focus on accountability. We heard that extremely clearly in the feedback from industry and government stakeholders that SRA needs to demonstrate accountability, and we are committed to doing that over the next 5 years. So why have we sort of focused on these areas? And I guess at the heart of it is that the long-term productivity trends show that productivity, that is cane yield, is flatlining, is what you can see on this chart here. So actually going back to 1975, cane yield has only increased by 0.2% on average year on year. And that is just not going to be enough. That incremental change is not going to be enough to drive fundamental profitability improvements and also set the industry up for the long term. We need to set a more ambitious target. And what's, I guess, underlining that is that the production base is declining. And we've sort of taken this view that at the heart of what we're trying to do here is identify priorities through variety development, through our R&D portfolio focused on crop protection, and also through adoption, priorities that will lead to a productivity uplift to address these issues. During the process of developing this strategic plan, stakeholders were very clear. We heard time and time again that SRA needs a sharper focus and stronger delivery. So we heard focus on productivity and profitability. So that's why we've landed on a 10% productivity target. We heard do fewer things well. Focus on, and what we've done in response is that we focused on 3 priorities around varieties, crop protection, and adoption. And to put things in perspective, when we released our R&D plan several years ago, we had 18 distinct priority areas. In this plan, we've cut that in half. We've now got 9 priority areas. There was, time and time again, we heard people say, do fewer things, but do them well and nail them. And that feedback has really resonated with us. And we hope you'll be able to see that we've listened to that in developing this plan. What was probably the most dominant feedback we heard was SRA needs to improve variety performance. Growers are telling us that we're not seeing performance gains in the field, and more needs to be done by SRA to demonstrate that our varieties perform in commercial conditions. So Garry will talk to you about specifically what we've put in the plan to address that. We also heard overwhelmingly the need for SRA to continue to invest in pest diseases and also exotic threats, and not only invest in them, but do it urgently. The industry needs solutions to stop production losses from pest diseases and ultimately to protect the industry from exotic threats that will undoubtedly make their way here at some stage in the future. Adoption was another key focus area, and what we've put in place is a much sort of sharper and disciplined focus on our district impact plans and the delivery model around that, and that's what Graham will talk to when we get to that section. And just to touch on 2 other points here before we move on is it was very clear to us through the feedback we heard, particularly from industry stakeholders, that SRA shouldn't just assume the default position as leading a lot of the initiatives, strategic initiatives to address the industry problems and to improve productivity. SRA cannot act alone. SRA needs to work in partnership and do that in a collaborative way. So we've really sort of taken that to heart and put that in the center of this plan and tried to adopt a partnership mindset, which was one of the feedback, some of the feedback we actually heard at one of the final sessions that we ran with some industry stakeholders. And then finally, as I've mentioned a few times now, we really have been told to do a better job at reporting transparently and show progress. And that's why you'll be able to see throughout the plan for each of the focus areas, we've got very clear milestones, deliverables, and measures that we're going to be tracking over the course of the 5-year plan. So with that said, in response to that feedback, this plan is focused on a much tighter focus delivery discipline, and stronger accountability. We are seeking to improve varieties through a stronger breeding, trialling, and commercial validation. Have much more focused R&D portfolio on solutions with the greatest impact and impact to productivity. That is what we're focused in on. Have clear delivery discipline with roadmaps, milestones, and gates so that stakeholders can go on our plan. They can see what we're trying to focus on, by when, and how we're going to report on that. And ultimately to work with our partners who are absolutely integral in helping us fund some of the work that's needed, helping us to develop that, to validate it, and then ultimately get that out into the hands of growers and advisors, and ultimately see productivity uplift with that results in greater cane supply. So with that said, in terms of the productivity target, what we've landed on is having a very ambitious target of 10%. And we've done that deliberately because, as I mentioned at the start, if you look at the ABARES data that is publicly available, you can see that on average, productivity growth since the 1970s has been 0.2% per year. So it's almost effectively flat. So what SRA is striving to do then is be much more ambitious and really focus in on priorities which are going to lead to a material uplift in productivity. And we are striving to lift average cane yield from 89 tonnes per hectare, which is our baseline, to 98 tonnes per hectare by June 2031. And the priorities that we're about to go through, we've assessed internally, and we believe these are the priorities that are most likely to contribute to a productivity uplift and enable us to get that 10% target. But what we do want to point out is that, SRA has to work with partners, and ultimately we are accountable for making a measurable contribution and reporting progress openly. But we need to work with partners to help us get there. So that is something that is going to be at the forefront of our minds over the coming months in how we work more closely with partners on addressing this ambitious target. So what are those focus areas? What are we looking at over the next 5 years? We've identified the 3 levers we believe have the clearest pathway to productivity, and they are varieties, crop protection, and adoption. But each of these are going to contribute in a different way in terms of when the benefits, that is the productivity benefits from the priorities in the plan, will be delivered to industry. So in the near term, most of the benefits are actually, we believe, are going to come from adoption, from the adoption initiatives in the plan. So, and what we're trying to do here and what the priorities in the plan are intending to do is deliver those near-term gains by effectively optimizing what is already available. What are the proven practices and varieties that we know work, that have been tested, and to get them in the hands of more growers. Crop protection is probably this next one. And that is about focusing on our projects, which are going to deliver tangible products and tangible solutions to reduce avoidable losses from pests, diseases, and weeds, and also to prepare the industry for exotic threats. And ultimately, what we're trying to do here is we're getting these projects finished and we're getting these solutions out to industry in the near to mid-term, so that we can start to deliver some of those benefits over the next 5 years. So that will contribute to the 10% as well. Varieties is obviously incredibly important, but the reality with variety development is that what we start to put in place now, we're not going to see the benefits from that for quite some time. In fact, not until the next strategic plan period. So the way we're treating varieties is what we're trying to do here is modernize the breeding program, but recognizing that the gains are not going to come through until the long term. And then finally, we've also got some enabling functions. And this, what's, I guess, relevant for today's discussion is that we have made some material improvements to our communications to ensure that we're communicating very clear and practical information, our work on terms of partnerships, and then finally, how we provide digital support tools to support with adoption particular varieties and supporting with variety selection and management. So I'd now like to hand over to Dr. Garry Rosewarne, who's going to walk us through the varieties.
Great, thanks, Ben. Look, SRA has an international reputation of running a world-class breeding program. I've been on the books here for 18 months, and in that time I've actually interviewed, I don't know, about 14 or 15 breeding companies from all the major places around the world: Brazil, China, India, Pakistan, Thailand. And it's certainly the case that our breeding program is on par with what they run in Brazil, and actually quite a long way ahead of all the others. However, there are a lot of new technologies out there that are completely changing the way breeding can be conducted. And SRA over the past 10 years have invested heavily in this area, into research into these new technologies. And those technologies are now at a maturity stage where they can be deployed in the breeding pipeline. And so that's what I see as Varieties doing over the next 5 years, is to really integrate those sort of new technologies into breeding to maximise variety output. So the technologies I'm talking about are firstly genomic selection based on AI technologies, remote sensing either through drones or proximal sensing devices, optimizing systems that generate the data. You know, there's the old computer adage, rubbish in, rubbish out. Now, I think we've got a good breeding program. We don't put rubbish into it. But if you're looking at remote sensing and genomics, we can get much higher quality data to put in. And when you combine that with AI, you can get step changes in outputs. And the last one we'll talk about is genetic modification. So if I go back to genomics, we've got a target of within 5 years to be genotyping 10,000 clones per year. Each clone gets about 50,000 data points, so that's 500 million data points we'll be generating a year. And then what this enables you to do is to take a seedling that's never been grown in the field, we'll germinate it in the glasshouse, take a leaf sample, extract the DNA, and we can get some level of prediction for numerous traits: tons a hectare, CCS, fibre, smut, pachymetra. That's what our research has delivered already. But going forward, we want to expand that out to a whole range of other traits, such as leaf scald, red rot, mosaic, Fiji, orange rust, brown rust, some of the quality traits that we're doing, and also some of the production traits, such as lodging, maturity, tiller number, stem diameter. And this gives us an unprecedented opportunity to change the way we do our breeding. Moving on to remote sensing, we've already got some accurate predictions by flying drones over our trials and can estimate tons of cane per hectare. But we also are working on trying to estimate sucrose from the field. We can get estimations for height, lodging, flowering, etc. And in this part of the work, we're also looking at using proximal sensors. These are handheld devices driven by AI technology to improve our estimations for pachymetra, red rot, and nematodes. So this all leads to better and more accurate data, but also big data. I talked about the 500 million data points for genomics. Well, I can't even estimate what the data points we'll be getting when you imagine that each image we take has got probably tens of thousands of pixels, and each pixel's a data point. We're talking to tens to billions of data points per year. So we're really entering into the world of big data with our AI-assisted genomics-based breeding program. And the third one I want to talk about is optimizing the trialing system. Now, this is all based around new statistical methods, and people think, oh, statistics, that must be a pretty boring sort of discipline to be in, but it actually moves at a really fast pace. I've been involved in breeding for the last 20, 30 years, and every year I see changes in statistical methods and how we can analyse data better. And so some of the new methods that we'll be incorporating into the program, we can do this immediately, is around using parental relationships of all the clones that we're looking at competition between the different plots and how that might affect yields, combining data sets from different regions. In our breeding pipeline, we typically analyse the North and Herbert together. We analyse the Burdekin separately, the Central separately, and so on. But we can actually combine all of those together to get a much more powerful analysis. We can also go back over multiple years too, which is something we don't typically do, combining 5, 6, 10 years of data all in the one analysis. And that really enables us to identify a whole lot of environmental classification. What are the actual real physical environments that we are breeding for? And this has never really been done to the extent that I'm proposing at SRA. This gives us, so in this process, we'll be reanalyzing the last 5 or 10 years of data, and maybe we might be able to find some previously overlooked clones and maybe find some fast tracks for release. And then once we've got all that and we understand the genotype by environment interactions and we understand how varieties are performing, and we can work out how we're deploying genomics and remote sensing technologies, we can actually restructure the entire breeding pipeline to really deliver optimal efficiency and an ability to leverage these new technologies. So that was a bit of the trial optimization. Then I'll just touch briefly on genetic modification. So I talked about before genomic selection. Genomic selection is using the DNA that we've got in our different clones and understanding how that contributes to yield. Genetic modification is different. Genetic modification is taking a gene from an exotic organism, such as a bacteria or an insect, and putting it into the sugarcane. You think back to the old Frankenfood moniker that's probably a bit outdated these days. Times have moved on and we want to reinvestigate what the opportunities for this are. However, it's not cheap and it comes with a huge regulatory burden. So we've got to do the next 18 months, we'll be doing a fairly detailed due diligence on this. Is this going to add value to the sugar industry? The first thing we have to look up is say, will the international markets accept genetically modified sugarcane? Some of them probably won't. So then we have to work out the value proposition around that. Then we have to understand which foreign genes are available and do a cost benefit analysis on those to make sure, is the intellectual property freely available to us and what's going to be the benefit to the farmer or to the mill. Then we've got to think about who pays for all this, because it is another breeding pipeline and it won't be cheap to install this. Then we have to think about what's involved in establishing trials and abiding by Australian regulators, working with the Office of Gene Technology regulator and all that sort of stuff. And then finally, does the Australian public support this? So that's all going to be encompassed in an 18-month due diligence process. And at the end of that, there'll be a stop go. If the light's green, then we can start to look at developing this pipeline. If the light's red, then we put that part to bed. So there we go. So we've got a roadmap for those four different areas. I'll just focus on what's happening for financial year 27 and how we're going to report on that. We're going to aim to genotype 5,000 clones this year. We did 3,000 last year, so that's just a step up. And by 2031, we'll be doing 10,000 clones a year. In remote sensing and AI, we're going to clearly define how we're using our drone technology, which flights we're doing on which trials and which data sets we're capturing, and starting to develop some AI tools around that. The trial optimization system, we're already doing a multi-environment trial analysis over the past 5 years, so we expect those results to come out in the next few months. And then by the end of the year, end of this financial year, we will have a costing model fully developed out, so we can start to do some scenario testing. So that'd be things like, how much does a plot cost to grow in Moringa versus how much a plot costs in the central region versus DNA extraction versus a pathogen test or something like that. And we can put all that together in a model and really try to deliver the best bang for the buck in the breeding program. And then the GM genetic modification due diligence will just be working through that process. And like I said, that's like an 18-month window. So we should be fairly well through that process within the coming year. And that's all I want to have for now. I'll pass it on to Tanashi for the next part of the talk.
Thanks, Gary. And yeah, just good morning, everyone. An update really on what we're doing with crop protection. And as Ben has already highlighted, our focus here is to reduce avoidable losses from endemic threats and ensuring that we're prepared for anything that's exotic and sort of outside our borders, and just having that preparedness for any biosecurity threats to the industry. And in terms of managing current losses, we're really looking at things like cane grubs, soldier fly, Pachymetra, RSD, and all those things that we know are a threat to the industry, and we are trying to manage at the moment. Without controls, some of these threats can actually lead to losses of up to 40%. So we need to maintain our controls. We need to ensure that we have access to all those mechanisms and methods and practices that help us protect the industry and ensure that we sort of reduce those losses. And we're also aware that there is a threat to some of the controls that we use, particularly with chemicals that are under review by the regulators. And we know recently there was an announcement regarding paraquat. We think there will be another one coming soon on imidacloprid and related pesticides, maybe sometime towards the end of this year. So that will ultimately, we think, lead to restrictions or changes to the way we can use these chemicals, and we need to prepare ourselves for that. In terms of exotic threats, we know there's things that are lurking on the board around us and on the borders, and we want to keep them where they are. And if they do happen to come here, we want to be prepared for when that happens and know that we have the controls in place in order to protect our industry. So if we just look at the next slide, which sort of outlines how we are targeting our work across these sort of three priorities in crop protection, we are looking at, sort of from preliminary research, really looking at trying to understand and identify what we're dealing with or the controls that we could use to manage known pests and diseases, right through to commercial deployment. So looking at things that are already ready or that could be prepared for deployment and adoption within the industry. And across the three streams of work, we are mainly focused on the deployment ready stuff for the endemic threats, also looking at the early stage stuff for exotic threats, and with the alternatives for those at risk controls that I said probably under review, and some which we don't know, which could be under review in future. What we are focusing on there is trying to identify those near-term solutions that can be deployed as soon as restrictions are put on the use of current controls. And as with other parts of the strategic plan, we have those clear stage gates in our delivery. So we will, at every point, stop and pause and think, who else do we need to partner with? What else have we learned, and what else can we do differently in terms of trying to identify those solutions and bringing them to market and bringing them to adoption. And throughout the process as well, we are working with partners from government, from research organizations, from the grower community and the milling community, but also from other RDCs, because some of these issues are cross industry and they require that cross-industry collaboration. In terms of funding and investments, we also very actively work with DPI, and as you will see, there are some projects there which are totally funded by DPI, or where we are co-investing with DPI as a key partner in trying to address these crop protection issues in the industry. And I know if we move to the next slide, which sort of shows while we are focused on sort of the early stage, the mid stage, and the late stage research for varieties and crop protection, our main focus for other areas, including agronomy and farming systems and milling and processing, is mainly towards the late stage stuff, where things are ready to be deployed or just need a few validation or verification trials to be done before they can be put out for adoption or for deployment. We will, however, look at other things that are early stage if there is co-investment or if there is a strategic drive to look at those things. But our primary focus for areas outside varieties and crop protection will be on the late stage activities. And this way we will balance our portfolio as required by industry, as required by our stakeholders. So we are prepared and we are ready to have those sort of early stage things bubbling and ready for moving on to the next stage of pre-commercial assessment and commercial deployment as the time requires. I think that will be it from me regarding our R&D portfolio and just that balance, and also the crop protection activities that we're doing, trying to address those threats that we have from pests, diseases, and weeds. And I'll hand over to Graham.
Thank you very much, Tinashe. And so I see the pointy end of the strategy really is adoption. How do we take this research that we have, particularly the proven research, and turn it into practical outcomes, those on the ground? How do we shift the dial in terms of tonnes per hectare of sugar and cane, but also how much money we're making on the ground? And I think what I see here is that we've actually got a lot of different tools and we have a lot of assets. The assets is that we have a lot of proven practices available to the industry. And we also have a lot of diversity between our farmers. So between the top and the middle, for example, there can be 30, 40 tonnes there. and between the bottom farmers and the top farmers can be quite significant. In some mill areas, we have up to 70 tonnes a hectare, for example, of cane. So that's a real asset that I think we can leverage. And our focus here, I like to call, is moving the middle. So how do we take that? How do we take that core, that between the 25% and 75% of maximum yield or maximum tonnes of cane per hectare, and shift it upwards through the uptake of those proven profitable practices? There's really three key things that I think are important to make this happen. The first one is that we often hear a lot about varieties. So when we're out in the districts, people say, the SRA varieties, we can do better there. But one thing I notice is that for the same variety, you can have somebody growing 120 tonnes per hectare and somebody else growing 70 tonnes per hectare. What's the difference there? What is the difference between farms and farmers that are driving those different productivity outcomes? So one of our big focus areas is really, how do we optimize variety selection? So how can we inform people's planting decisions? And then also, how do we, once we have the right variety in the right place, how do we treat it the right way? So I think that agronomy, getting the agronomy right for each variety, is really the problem that my business unit or the adoption team are really focused on fixing. And I've looked back at the past studies of the Australian sugarcane industry, and we know that when we look at the determinants of yield, 80% of it is driven by climate, but then what's left, 80% of that is agronomy and 20% is variety selection. So what it shows to me is that if you get the agronomy right, then you can achieve that step change in productivity that we know that we need. Another part is also recognizing where SRA's places on the delivery chain or on the supply chain of information and expertise for farmers. And so we have quite a unique role in that we have a lot of good researchers, but we also have a lot of well-respected experts across the different areas that SRA works. And so a big focus is what I call the 3T program, or the train the trainer. And this is where we build advisor capability, and they might be private advisors, they might be advisors attached to milling companies, they may be prod boards. But if people are really keen on upskilling in the latest research, or even the most basic research, I see that as a core focus of ours and a key role for us. And really the third prong of what we're looking at is just really optimizing our district impact plans. So we've had several comments about them. Sometimes we find the district impact plans are very activity focused rather than impact focused. It's one of the things that we've heard. Another one that we heard during consultation was that they're not backed by the stakeholders, and it was something that SRA was trying to push rather than what the stakeholders wanted. So what we're really trying to do now is that we're piloting several different ways of making sure that those two criticisms aren't a failing of us. So for example, one thing that we're trialing in 2 mill areas at the moment is having an advisory board and working with SRA to oversee the district delivery of our staff, which is a lot more intensive and a lot more stakeholder driven than it has been in these areas in the past. The fourth part of what the adoption business unit doing is really looking at tissue culture expansion. And so we produce around 150,000 plants each year within our tissue culture facility at SRA. And it is, there's amazing benefits accruing to tissue culture. One of them is the ability to provide new varieties faster. Another one is that it's probably one of the leading sources of clean seed, as we all know. However, it is costly for SRA and the industry. And also we do have, sometimes if the plants aren't treated the right way, we can get high levels of mortality. And so really what a big focus is that let's just try and understand our delivery pathway and also our business model around tissue culture. And then so we're getting right and deep, and we've started a process of talking to our industry experts about that. And if we can prove that viability within the first 3 to 6 months, then that's when we'll start to scale it carefully to make sure that we can get the benefits of tissue culture, but without increasing risk. So I just wondered about going to the next slide. Thank you very much for that. So this is a big part of our strategy, is really focusing on accountability and transparency. And that's one thing I heard almost every stakeholder consultation we had was transparency and accountability. And so that's something that I've really focused on as I've come into this new role. And I've been here about 6 months, and I think we're starting to, notice a real change across the whole of SRA in these areas. So in terms of the agronomic packages, how do we treat the right variety, the right way, in the right place? What we're working on is at the moment, we're establishing 4 different regional variety management groups, which will provide a nucleus of experienced people who might be from prod boards, different consulting, different SRA variety development team, consultancies, growers themselves, and just, where there's a lot of people interested in varieties. So let's come together around varieties and share our expertise and try some things. So when we can learn from each other there. So it's a very flexible co-learning model where we can, based around varieties, we can share experience and try and grow our knowledge of how to get the best out of these different genetic resources that we have. With our district impact plans, we've recently completed these across the whole of the coast. I think in the Southern District, we're still in the process of developing them. However, we've got a new framework there, a strong focus on impact and outcomes, and what we're doing is quantifying how much we're going to shift the dial by associated with each of our actions. So we're really going back to how do we lift productivity at scale. In terms of commercial validation, that's really building on what we've done in the past, is that how do we get out into the paddock with farmers? And I think that's been quite a notable thing that we're doing now. Like, for example, in the Southern District, we've just hired a new agronomist there, and we're looking at hiring another one as well. And really our focus there is that how do we get the focus in the paddock with the farmer, and working with our delivery partners to actually work with the farms to understand what works in practice and what will shift the dial. In terms of partner capability, that's where at the moment, we started trial in August, September of our the trainer program, just at a district level. However, what we're doing at the moment is just trying to partner with others to understand what the needs are and what the best ways of delivering this training is. And in terms of the tissue culture due diligence, we're right in the middle of that right now. We're just talking to a lot of people. We're thinking about the different delivery models. We're thinking about the pros and cons, and just trying to gather together experience. But I think really within the adoption business unit, what we see is that we've had historically a very good adoption unit. But what we're doing, first of all, we're trying to optimize what we currently do. But it's almost like the Queenslander when you re-stump it. We're taking a first level, we're taking a one-level house, a single-story house, and we're elevating it. We're re-stumping it, or lifting it really, and building that strong foundation. And I think that's what we're doing. We're not only sweeping out our single-story house, but we're also seeking to elevate it. And if we're successful in that elevation, which I'm pretty sure we will be, then that's when we'll start to see a real shift in the dial on both production outcomes and profitability outcomes. So I might go to the next slide there. Thank you. And so in terms of the agenda, the next section that we'll cover is that I'll speak to the partnership, the partnerships aspect, but then Ben Simpson will come back in and talk about the reporting on the maintenance of transparency and accountability over time. Really, I think when I think about the strategy, it's really to do with our programs or our plans, which we're presenting today. But really, the meat in the sandwich, is the partnership mentality. And so, how do we work with people along the delivery chain to actually really make sure, or delivery pipeline, to make sure that we get that shift in outcomes? We can't do it alone. And that's because of resources, but also because we lack the expertise. And a lot of the expertise we need to shift the dial is actually the growers themselves, the millers themselves, but also between us and them. And so it's really how do we draw on that expertise. And so our district impact plans are really important here. Our district impact plans are open conversations which are stakeholder-led, and trying to understand who's doing what and providing some facilitation of that. We also have productivity boards. Mills and growers are really helping us on trying to validate and deploy our solutions. And I think a real key for us here is trying to repair those relationships, as sometimes they're uneven and not entirely optimized. And we also see a strong role for the government, different government partners to focus on public good priorities, and also provide some co-investment, particularly in relation to irrigation management. And also we'll partner with other RDCs and commercial partners to help think about new solutions and how we fund and develop those. Thank you very much, Ben.
Okay, so just to sort of bring us home here, as we've mentioned a few times now, accountability is at the centre of this plan, and we've been very deliberate in developing the plan around key measures and ensuring we're going to be able to report transparently to industry and government stakeholders on the progress in delivering that plan. So as if you've had a chance yet to have a look inside the plan, in each of the key focus areas, you'll see across for each of the 9 priorities, we've got a number of measures. So we have delivery measures, we've got outcome measures, and we've got impact measures. And we will be reporting on how we've gone against those measures regularly. And in addition to that, we're going to be reporting on what we've spent, what's been delivered, what's changed. If there's been a delay, what's delayed and how long has it been delayed for? And if we have to make a decision on stopping something or changing something or scaling something, we intend to report exactly what's happened and why that is. So over the coming months, you're going to start to see some information be shared from SRA on our progress against the plan. And we are committed to doing it in a way where we're going to be communicating very clearly and do it in a way that's, I guess, not in a corporate-like way. We want to do it just in a plain, clear way that everyone can access and everyone can see how we're going against delivering the plan. And then just the final thing to sort of touch on is we've also got some key enabling priorities in the plan. And I mentioned this at the start, but particularly around communications, digital support, the 2 ones I just want to single out now. With respect to communications, we heard time and time again feedback particularly from industry stakeholders that SRA needs to provide clear, targeted and practical information. So we've built into our plan how we're going to do that and do that in a way that supports the adoption, that we're giving very clear information around those adoption priorities that Graham just spoke to. And then in terms of digital support, we are also looking at how we can develop decision support tools for growers and advisors to use to optimize variety selection and management. So this is something that to build on what SRA used to have, which was QCane Select, something that in the same vein of that, but a more accessible and effective tool is something that we're looking at doing and rolling out as part of this 5-year plan. And then finally, the other 2 areas, probably more related internally, but just for transparency, so you're aware, we are putting a renewed focus on talent to ensure we've got the right capability needed to deliver the plan, and also, importantly, financial sustainability. SRA has finite resources. We need to ensure that we allocate those resources to the highest impact priorities. And that very much is the reason for focusing in on the areas we've just spoken to. So that's it from me. I'll now hand it over to Natalie and we'll get into some questions.
Well, thank you, Ben, Garry, Tinashe, and Graham for a very comprehensive presentation about our new strategic plan. So now it's time for questions. So if you have a question, can you raise your hand and I will will unmute and you can ask a question, or if you can write it in the Q&A box on top of your bar, Okay. Yeah, you can ask your question, Greg. Greg, you have to unmute yourself as well.
There's a question in the chat while we wait for Greg to get organised
Okay.
from Megan McKenzie.
Okay, so the question from Megan is, to deliver the plan, the enabler for capabilities will be important. I note that on page 36 of the plan, it states that SRA will strengthen organization capability. What opportunity are there for capabilities outside of SRA? And how will SRA go about engaging the capability across the RD&A system to solve problems? For example, funding, calls, etc.
I wonder, I could touch on part of that myself, Natalie. And the first part where it says that how does SRA strengthen organisational capabilities outside of SRA, like I see that as a key part of the adoption business unit is how do we build capability along the delivery pipeline. That might be later than what Megan is thinking, later in the pipeline, but we see that as a really critical means of making sure that we enable others to really help deliver those industry outcomes. And also in terms of engaging capability across the RD&E system, I think, it's very important that we can leverage that external income, when it ties to industry priorities. However, we also have to be careful about what I see as a careful balance between achieving industry outcomes and building capability, but also making sure that we keep our eye on the prize. Like we're here to shift production and profitability, and sometimes investing in research can actually distract us. So I think it has to be really carefully thought about and aligned to strategy if we're really going to implement it well.
Yeah, I believe the second part of the question might be answered by Tinashe.
Yes, thanks, Natalie. So as we have always done, we will try to, the way we invest is we identify a priority, a problem, we identify potential ways of addressing it, and we, as required, go out to identify the talent to deliver to that priority. And sometimes the talent lies within SRA, often it lies outside SRA, and we work collaboratively with other research organizations, so RDCs, universities, and other private research organizations to deliver where we don't have that capacity within. And I think there's an example, for example, today, I think Garry is hosting some partners that we are working with in trying to improve our breeding and trying to improve our understanding of the genetics of sugarcane. So we are working collaboratively with other people outside SRA, and even to develop that capability within SRA, we require other people to participate and help us in doing that. So it's deliberate, and it's something that we do sort of intentionally, really. We just don't wait for it to happen, this interaction and development of capability outside.
In fact, Tinashe, given the fact that, like a lot of problems that we come across, like smut, for example, it's like an international problem. Is there like any, way of like, I know we are collaborating with some partner because then, we'll need less money to actually solve the problems that it's, everywhere. I know Pachymetra is not one of them, unfortunately, but smut is one of them. And a lot of people have made lots of advance on it. And I know, like, for example, the orange rust problem, like a lot of the French group had big advance on this, and we can actually leverage their research as well, like to implement it into our research. So
yes, yeah. And that's something that clearly our board also sort of asks every time we put up a proposal for approval. Not only that we are learning from other industries, sugarcane industries outside Australia, but also other industries within Australia who have the same problem. So yes, we do that, and it's as a necessity really to do our R&D. We do need to work with other people.
Yeah. Okay. Greg, maybe you can try to ask your question.
Natalie, I've actually got Greg's question. He's just sent it to me. He's having some computer issues, so I might just relay it. And I think, Graham, you might be best to talk to this particular one. So Greg's comment is that each region will have to have different priorities in work plans to get the 10% gain over 5 years. And that's going to mean different things to each region. That's right, Graham?
It's exactly correct. And that's the whole concept, is that our district impact plans, which historically were known as district plans, we've actually broken them down now. We've decomposed them to allow the fact that they can be defined at mill areas. So, for example, in the southern region, we've got 3 different district impact plans, one for each mill area. And so that's well, we've got Northern New South Wales, Rocky Point, Bundaberg, and Isis/Maryborough. So I think Greg is right on the money, and that's why we've kind of led to our district impact plans being more focused.
Yeah, thank you, Graham. There's a question from Phil here. Will the productivity improvement plan need a slightly different approach for New South Wales 2 years all cane?
I believe it will, Natalie. So Hayden Slattery, our new CEO, him and I went to spend some time with New South Wales cane growers, some New South Wales growers, and also Sunshine Sugar last week. And what we're doing is we're resetting our focus down there. And so Garry might be able to speak to some of the variety part that what his team are doing down there. But from the adoption and agronomy perspective, we're looking to totally reset how we do it. And that hopefully will involve the addition of a new staff member who's located there, and they'll be focused on the particular farming regions, farming systems for that region, including the 2-year crop.
There's a question from Michael. Does the SRA strategic plan envisage a new or expanded focus on the sugarcane industry, including bioenergy products, or will it remain primarily focused on sugar production? The answer to this question will directly impact the variety grown and the strategy adopted to increase productivity.
I can
So
answer
we do have current investments that are looking at those bio products, biofuels, bioenergy, alternative products from sugarcane. The primary focus for this strategic plan is productivity, but we are not neglecting that part of research. So we have ongoing investments in that space, noting that our contribution is mainly going to be in the supply of the feedstock. And there are other issues which may limit or may influence how well the sugarcane industry really participates in this space. But we are doing sort of background work in that space, and we will continue to support that. But
Garry?
yeah, you probably have something to add, Garry.
Yeah, and from the varieties front, we have a small pipeline around energy canes. So it comes out of our introgression program where we're trying to make some diverse crosses to really bump up the biomass. I think that can flow through into the main breeding pipeline. But we've had a trial planted in the tablelands. We've got some more energy canes coming through the system as well, and we're looking to expand this trialling network, particularly into the harsher soils. And we've got a bit of interest down south as well in getting support with industry to help us grow these trials. We don't have them explicit budget for this sort of stuff, but we're just putting some effort into it. We also interact with a private company, and we've helped them import some energy canes from overseas, and they're starting to show some renewed interest in that sort of area. Probably we can't develop too much in that sort of area until we get sort of government signals that's a priority area for us to go through. So, but we'd be ready to ramp this up at any stage that's appropriate.
Yeah. But I mean, we don't want to be lagging in this area, and we actually do collaborate with one ARC on biomass. So this is like an investment that we are doing as well.
And we may just point out that that's also that our investment in that hub, the ARC research hub on engineering plants to replace fossil carbon, is also a co-investment with DPI. So, and the understanding there is that we can develop tools that will help us identify energy gains, but also those tools can be used to improve other productivity traits. So it's not just focused on biofuels and bioenergy. These tools that we develop in this space will also be applicable to other areas of our crop improvement.
Yeah, and also we like trying to use like the waste product, so we can do both in that case.
Yeah.
So, so I'm coming. All right. Well, Rob, trying to try again, and if you are, then I'll stop what I'm saying, and then you can ask a question. So there is a question for Garry about GM from Jordan Villares. Has been discussed with growers supports. Why are productivity measured in tons per hectare? Didn't increase much in the past couple of years. What are the impediments?
I think if we're talking about tons of cane per hectare, hasn't moved for 40 years. Not very much anyway. So I can look at the breeding pipeline and we can show increases in genetic gain pretty consistent at about 0.8%. But it doesn't get into the farmers. When it gets into the farmers' hands, it doesn't get expressed. So I'm happy to look at I'm looking at the breeding pipeline and what we can change in that to make sure it is absolutely relevant. I think there are things that we can do around getting more smaller regional adaptation trials to work out where the varieties perform best. It's very expensive to run a breeding pipeline, and so we've got about 20 odd FAT trials or our stage 3 trials across the country. How can we make sure we leverage them the best? I guess the thing is that we try to implement best local farmer practice. So, we've got ultra clean seed that we're putting in the ground, so we limit diseases coming through. We make sure we go on uniform soils. We try to target soils that are representative of the region, but we want uniform soils. We try to manage as best we can. However, and to do that, because we're trying to pick up, quite small differences in productivity between the different clones, 5 or 10%, from mid-range clones to the best performing one. So it's not much. And if you get a variety out there and it's grown on the wrong soil type, and maybe because we haven't given you enough information about its soil type, or maybe disease has not been managed as well as it could be, like if you go into a high pachymetra soil or something like that, then any of these moderate productivity gains that the breeding program delivers just gets eaten up by the bugs. So I think from our point of view, particularly working closer with the adoption team with Graham, we want to make sure that we can really not only give you the genetics in new varieties, but also give you the most appropriate agronomic and farming systems practices that go with it. So we give you very clear direction on where to grow it and how to grow it, and to really try to optimize that output. And I think that's something that, at least in the recent past, SRA has probably not done all that well. I think if we go back to the BSES days, there was a lot more support for that sort of adoption and extension work, and that kind of dried up when we moved to SRA. So I think that's probably where we kind of sit with that now. And so we want to try to reinvent some of that and just do it by working closer within SRA, but also with external partners too, because they're critical in that aspect.
I think there's a last question. Partner and industry delivery capacity may vary across region, is listed as a risk. What is SRA specifically doing about districts that do not have a strong productivity board relationship, and what action will be taken to close that gap? So that was from Tara Neal, sorry.
Yes, no, thank you, Natalie. I think the key thing that we're doing is really leaning in, if that's the right term. The thing is, these are personal relationships, and some of them are long-standing, sometimes for years. And the thing is that what we're trying to do is start basics, start trying to build trust, and then through that, as we develop that trust, trying to leverage that for industry outcomes. And I think we've really it's one thing that I do see. We do have uneven and sometimes fractured relationships, but I think really it's just showing up and trying to be good humans as as some people would say, trying to be fair, really. I think, and just really trying to focus on the industry. But it's in some. I'm hopeful that it will work. In some parts, it may not work, but we're going to keep trying because it's for the good of the industry. So that's our main approach.
Yeah, thanks, Graham. All right, I'm sorry, Rob, you didn't manage to ask your question, but you can actually send your question. Oh, yeah, you can ask your question to our speakers. Like you can go on our website and ask question to anyone. And the webinar will be made available for people who registered, so you can watch it again, and you can go to the website to have the frequently asked question as well. So thank you again for joining us today. It was a great comprehensive presentation from Ben, Garry, Tinashe, and Graham. Thank you very much. And have a good afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.